We are back on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio, News Talk 1180, 1230 KGEO, and 1410 KERI. So, Clay, what did you think of Bruce Hershenson?
I love Bruce.
Isn't he great?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I worked hard on his campaign 20 years ago, and unfortunately, dirty politics is what won the day for the Democrats that election, and I'm sorry to say.
His book is scary.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But unfortunately, it's right on. But we're going to take a little bit of a turn here. Our next guest and her organization have done a lot for the citizens of Kern County. They're watchdogs making sure the taxpayers' interests are being looked after. Our guest by phone, Jenifer Pitcher, Community Liaison for Kern Citizens for Sustainable Government. Jenifer, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Well, thank you.
You guys do a great job watching out for the rest of us.
Thank you. We try.
Yeah,
there's a lot of issues to be looked at. So.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about your organization, Kern Citizens for Sustainable Government.
Yeah, we're a 501c4, so we're a nonprofit issue advocacy group. No, we're not a PAC. Our mission is to just ensure sustainable economic practices are implemented at the local level. We feel that local government has the biggest impact on your life, and it's the closest to you, and so we really want to keep our issues local, and just make sure that taxpayer dollars are being spent wisely.
So yours is an organization that people can donate to if they wanted to.
Yeah. So far, we have 3 board members, and thus far we've been completely self-funded. We have membership fees. We have a small advisory board, but most of our funding comes from individual donations and fundraisers that we will soon be having more of.
So when you say local, do you mean city, county, or both of those?
Right now we're focusing on county. Our 3 board members are Chad Hathaway, J.P. Lake, and Patrick Wade, and they actually got together when Measure D was on the ballot at the city of Bakersfield for pension reform for public safety employees. And that's the issue that really brought them together. They felt very passionately about. And so instead of, doing things individually, they pulled their resources together, started this organization, and then brought me on board last year. And so right now we're also looking at pension reform at the county. And the supervisors and the unions have been negotiating. So there hasn't been a ballot measure or anything like that. But we just wanted to let the public know this is how much money we're spending on pensions every year. And
so what is it about the pensions that you want to change?
They're just not sustainable at the current rate. I mean, our pension fund's only 61% funded. We spent over $200 million last year on pensions alone. We spend so much money in pensions that we actually can't afford operational costs.
Don't you feel that if the economy was to turn around, that could turn around the funding opportunities?
I think so, but at this point, there's so many issues with pensions and things like SRBR that capture a lot of the whenever we have a rate of return that's higher than expected. I don't know. We just had such a slump in 2008, and we just took such a hit in those recession years that I think it's going to take a long time for us to see to regain those back.
Well, I'm sure you're aware that I know you're aware that the vote was taken and they dropped the police and fire pensions from 3 at 50 to 2 at 50, I believe. How's that going to impact our hiring abilities?
I know the unions have used the argument that our pensions are what makes us competitive. I don't really think that's necessarily true. Whenever I talk to policemen and firemen, I always ask them, why did you become, police officer or a fireman or a firefighter? And they, say it's something they want to do. It's a calling. It's that, they want to work in public service, which is, a fantastic answer. But I've never once heard it's because of the pensions. And I know that's an added benefit, but I think that there are still people out there that, that want to do these jobs and that are very capable of doing these jobs. And it's not necessarily for less money, but it's something that's just more a system that's a better steward of taxpayer resources.
Sure. We're having a conversation with Jenifer Pritchard, Community Liaison for Kern Citizens for Sustainable Government.
You know, Jenifer, I think the next question that I might ask would be going to an experienced policeman and saying, why do you stay or why don't you stay? Because so many of them leave and go to other departments or other opportunities. And I think pensions has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I think so. And I even think that, I even think the people who work in public safety are realizing that that the pension system's unsustainable. Right now we're paying for 3 police forces, 2 to be retired and 1 to be on the streets. And it's really hitting the operational cost at the county level.
And it's not just the police and fire, it's the entire county, actually.
Right. And by no fault of any of the employees. They weren't the ones who made the decisions, But I don't know, but it needs fixing.
And your solution at this point?
We supported the 2 at 50 for the newer hires. Now, I think it's a great new system. We're not going to be able to see the benefits of that for at least another 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But possibly having employees pay more towards health benefits, which they are doing under the new agreement. So, any kind of little savings like that, it's not going to really touch the billions of dollars that we owe in pensions. But, if you put in a sustainable practice early on, then it's going to perpetuate and eventually it's going to have a big impact.
What about the possibility of moving to, like the private sector does, a 401k or a 403b type of system?
Honestly, I don't know too much about this, but I think it would be, a good idea. We want public pensions to be more in line with the private sector, whether that's through like a hybrid pension system or a straight 401k. That's up to the elected officials to decide, but it should be just more in line with the private sector. Pensions were originally started to compensate for lower wages for the public sector.
Exactly.
That, is an added benefit. You're going to take a pay cut, but you get these great pensions. Well, it's not the case anymore. Now the public sector is having just as competitive wages, if not more, and they get a pension on top of that at the expense of the taxpayers, especially after the recession when you have people losing their jobs, losing everything they own. But, we need to make sure that this one group of people doesn't lose anything that they've earned. And I don't think that it should be taken away just because the economy, but I think that we learned our lesson that, hey, what we did wasn't the best plan.
I think you hit it right on the head that the private sector hasn't kept pace with the public sector, or the public sector is actually just taking care of their own without letting the private sector do what they want to do with all the rules, regulations, and requirements that government is throwing on small businesses, as an example.
Right. I think that, the private sector and public sector needs to work together because, one is a reflection of the other. And you can't, and, they work, you have to work together, public and private, and so there needs to be a partnership and there needs to be smart economic policy in there.
Well, we also need to rein in the public sector. It seems like the growth is unsustainable as we continue down this path under the current regime that's in Washington. Right.
It's definitely, big government continues to grow, and again, like I said, there are so many issues out there groups like ours can tackle, and we wanted to keep ours local so we can see more of an impact. If you go to Washington and try to fix that, it's good luck,
Yeah, it's haunting to do that.
Right.
One of the things that you mentioned in your literature was you were talking about pension spiking and double dipping. Can you explain that?
Yeah, pension spiking is when a public employee is getting ready to retire, and the last year they spike their pay up extremely high, and so whenever they retire, they get 90% at their highest pay. So, in some cases it's been 150% of what they were actually probably should have made throughout their career.
Yeah, which is amazing. When we come back from the break, I'll let you talk about double dipping, okay?
Okay.
We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio News Talk 1180.